So we're hosting it. It's myself, Steve Henson, Head of Accounts at Blackstar, and Dylan Pepler, our Marketing Manager from Blackstar, and we have the VP of Product from Brightmetrics, Peter Horner. So thanks, Peter, for setting this up for us today. So given that we have a mixed attendee schedule here today, I'll just give you a quick insight as to who Blackstar are, for those of you that don't know us. So we're essentially a business communications company based in Bristol, but we have coverage throughout the UK and into Europe as well. And we're a trusted business communications partner, providing our customers with fixed line and mobile services, connectivity, firewalling, which includes WAN, LAN and Wi-Fi, Starlink video conferencing, ShoreTel and MyTel telephone systems, which we provide on-premise via private cloud and public cloud, along with ongoing ShoreTel and MyTel system support maintenance. Our customers also benefit from access to value-add vendors such as Redbox, Oak and Oasis via their call recording solutions, and of course today Brightmetrics Analytics, which provide critical insights into customers' ShoreTel system and contact center performance. So Peter's going to guide us through the 5 key metrics every call center manager needs to master. I'd just like to make you aware that the webinar will be recorded. So for anybody that couldn't make it today, or colleagues that would have liked to attend but couldn't, we will be sending out a link to the webinar when it's finished today. So over to you, Peter. And again, we will have the option to ask some questions, which Peter will answer as he goes through the webinar. And if there's anything we don't cover today that you wish to follow up on, myself and Dylan will reach out to the attendees with a follow-up email. So over to you, Peter.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve. Hi, everyone. Nice to, I guess, virtually meet you. As Steve mentioned, and I'll just reiterate, I always love in these kinds of presentations to be open to and flexible around questions. Logistically, we're using Zoom today. If you jump into the little Q&A section on there, type those in. I have another monitor that's up and running. I'll see those come in. I'm happy to address those in line, so don't feel like you need to hold your questions till the end. If there's anything that piques your curiosity or sparks your interest, let me know that as we run through. We're going to talk today about the 5 metrics every call center manager should master. I'll give you a glance here. This is the 5 metrics I'm going to cover. We're going to go through them. I don't like to spend a lot of times on agenda slides. I like to just kind of dig into the meat of the presentation, but I do want to do a little bit of table setting here. One of the things that I think is really important in a presentation like this is I use the word call center, but many of you might not use the actual contact center or call center applications with your MyTel system. So, and when I say MyTel, I know that we've gone through over the last couple of years this big transformation of calling it ShoreTel and now calling it MyTel. So when I say MyTel, I'm using that synonymously. I know many of you probably still refer to your systems as ShoreTel. So whether you call it ShoreTel or MyTel, My Voice Connect, that's what I'm talking about. A little bit about Brightmetrics, if you don't know who we are. We're an analytics platform that overlays on top of what used to be ShoreTel. We've worked with ShoreTel for a very, very long time. Actually got into this space because 10 years ago we were a reseller of ShoreTel and saw an opportunity to build an analytics platform. So that's who we are. But when I talk about call center, so we're looking at metrics that call center managers need to master. A call center is very simple in our minds. It doesn't mean that you're using the ECC application with your system. What it means is that you have a point in your system where a caller comes into and they are automatically distributed to a team of people. For those of you that use hunt groups or work groups or ECC, in our minds, all of those serve as call centers. You're taking interactions that are coming in some volume, calls that are coming in, and distributing them amongst a team. The mechanism for how that happens, how your system's doing that, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you need to be able to track and measure how effective are we at getting those calls into the hands of the right people. And so when I say call center, that's really what I mean here. I'm not saying if you're using work groups, this is still an applicable webinar for you. If you're using hunt groups, there's a lot of data that we can draw out of this. If you're using contact center, we can absolutely work with you as well. There's a lot to take it to the next level. We're going to flip-flop a little bit today. I find it really, really helpful when we walk through these metrics to look at actual live examples of the data that I'm talking about. So I'm going to pull up the Brightmetrics application, give you a little bit of insight into what a live customer does with some of these metrics, and then we'll also use some slides to run through definitions. With that, that's more than enough of an introduction. Let's just jump into the metrics. We're going to walk through this 1 through 5 here. We're going to start with the first metric, abandon rate. And if I were to poll the audience today and ask, hey, of everyone who's here, how many of you have ever used one of the measurements that I put up on that last screen? The one that typically people would say, oh yeah, I've looked at that before, is abandon rate. So let's start with a definition and then we'll talk about what we're going to do with this metric. Abandon rate is a very simple measurement in a call center environment. The measurement looks at the percentage of calls that are abandoning a call queue. Now, again, I understand that if you're using hunt groups, it's not a call queue, it's just a ring group and it's ringing through to various participants. So bear in mind, I'm massaging some of the terms here a little bit and giving us, the word queue as a placeholder. But if you're in hunt groups, you can still measure abandon rate. If you're in contact center, it is a call queue, and so you can absolutely measure it. Same thing with work groups. But basically what this means is take all the calls that came in on a day, over 30 days, over a quarter, and take the percentage of those callers that hung up the phone. Probably every one of you has done this at some point. You call into some service provider that you have, you wait and you wait and you wait, and maybe it's 3 minutes later and you say, you know what, I've got some other things I need to get done. I'm going to go ahead and abandon this particular call. I'm going to give up, I'll call back later. That's what we're talking about here. What I want to talk about with this metric is defining the benchmark for this metric, because I think there's a really common misconception around what your abandon rate should be. I talk to a lot of customers that say to me, Peter, we don't want a single abandoned call. We want effectively a 0% abandon rate. And I don't actually think that's the best way to approach this measurement. The reason being is, in any sizable call volume, there's always going to be a few customers here and there that dial in that hang up after 2 seconds. Why that might be, there's a lot of reasons. It might be that they dialed in, and while they were calling, their cell phone rang with a call from their wife, and they said, oh, I'll call back, and they picked up that call and said it was more important. Or maybe in another example, they dialed in, and as they were dialing in, they solved whatever problem they were calling about and said, oh, I don't need this anymore. They hung up the phone. If you can reasonably answer those calls, it typically is a really strong indication that you're overstaffed, because you're able to pick up even the callers that don't want to be picked up. And so in general, we look at a 0% abandon rate as a key indication that you're overstaffed. Let me help illustrate this with a different chart here. This is a chart. This is something I borrowed from a company called MetricNet. And to be honest with you, if you like to get really down into case studies and articles about this kind of measurement and metric and call center benchmarks, MetricNet is an awesome company to take a look at. Jeff Rumberg is one of the guys that leads a lot of their studies there. They've worked with over 3,000 call centers today. And one of the really interesting studies that they've done that I like to rely on is they've looked at, across the 3,000 call centers they work with, they've looked at and compared abandon rate to customer satisfaction. So they've worked with call centers where they're measuring both customer satisfaction and abandon rate. And then they've plotted that onto a chart here. So you have your customer satisfaction on the y-axis going from 40% to 100%, and you have the call abandonment rate on the x-axis going from 0 up to 30%. Here's what I want you to notice. If you look at a 0% abandon rate, no callers abandoning the call queue, customer satisfaction is on this, kind of line that they've drawn, the trending line, is at about 92 or 93% here. Now, that is an obvious thing to understand. There's a lot of other factors that play into customer satisfaction. So even if you pick up every call, doesn't mean everyone's going to be happy with those calls. So that's why it's not 100% there. But here's what's really interesting to notice. At 0%, if you start to draw this line over to the right, it holds pretty steady at that 92% range until you get to about this point right here. And that's the 4% line. If you have a 4% abandon rate, typically your customers are not going to be any less satisfied with you than they would be at a 0% abandon rate. Now, it's going to take a significant amount of staff to hit a 0% abandon rate over a 4%, but there's not a meaningful rise in customer satisfaction on that. So I would pose the question to you, Why would you want a 0% abandon rate over a 4% abandon rate if it makes no difference to your customers? So all of this kind of ties into what I was talking about there, where if you're below a 4% abandon rate, that can typically be an indication of overstaffing. Now, the one thing I'll say here is this assumes that your resources' primary focus and job throughout the day is to be on the phone. If you've got teams where, hey, yeah, they're supposed to pick up the phone, but they do a bunch of other things with their day, that can change this a little bit. Being on the phone is the number one priority. Make sure you pick that up. And we want a 0% abandon rate, but we only get maybe 150 calls across 9 people in a day. And so in that case, it's not it's expected that we're going to answer all of them. So this assumes that that we're talking about a customer service group or inside sales group that's job is to be on the phone all day. Now you might say, okay, well that's great. I wish I had a problem with overstaffing, but my problem's on the other side. I have a 15 or a 20% abandon rate. What should I be targeting for a number? On that side of it, we recommend 8%. And that's really driven by this line chart here. If you notice, once I hit that 4%, we do start to see a decrease in customer satisfaction. But even over at this 8% point, it still is somewhere around that 87, 88% range. It's still a pretty good customer satisfaction number. Most people are willing to accept that sort of a drop off during their peak hours of the day. Once you get past 8%, it really takes a steep decline from there. So ideally, you want to target an abandon rate between 4 to 8%. If you find that your abandon rate's under 4%, my kind of quick finger in the wind guess is you're a little bit overstaffed. If you find that your abandon rate is over 8%, my quick guess would be you have some places or some times when you're frustrating the callers that are dialing in. Your customer satisfaction might be impacted there. So that's our first measurement. Now, I hate leaving measurements like that hanging out there without giving any solutions to, if you don't fit perfectly into my little box there, that 4 to 8%, what do you do with that? And so that's our second measurement, actually plays right off of the last one. This is the answer to that question. If you go and pull up your abandon rate and find out, oh, we have a 15 or a 20%, or we're at a 2%, what are the things that you can look at to diagnose that further and to figure out how to actually adjust for it? That's where I want you to take a look at your queue times. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about terminology. I call this particular metric broadly queue times, but depending on what system you're using within your ShoreTel environment, your MyTel environment, it's going to have a different name. If you're running hunt groups, there is no call queue. You're going to look at ring time. If you're running work groups, you're going to look at queue time. If you're running ECC groups, you're actually going to look at wait time. So a different term for each one of you. Here's what those 3 measurements ultimately tell you. They look at from the moment that a caller enters the group, hunt group, work group, ECC group, from the moment that they enter the group, how long on average did they wait until they exited the group? An exit of the group would be getting connected to one of your agents or one of your employees. It would be them hanging up the phone. It would be them hitting any kind of routing conditions that you have, forward always, forward no one logged in, all those sorts of things. So what you want to do is look at whatever measurement it is. Again, a brief recap for everyone so you can look up your own measurement. If it's hunt groups, it's ring time. If it's work groups, it's queue time. If it's ECC groups, it's wait time. I want you to do 2 things with those measurements. I want you to look at your overall queue time or your overall wait time. That means for every caller, regardless of what happened with them at the end of their call, what was their average overall queue time? And then I want you to compare that to the abandoned callers. For your abandoned callers, what was their average queue time? This one's a little bit easier to look at in the context of some real data. So I'm going to pull up Brightmetrics over here and bring up our application. This is what Brightmetrics looks like. I mentioned at the top end we're a reporting and analytics solution. That plays out in a couple primary ways. You see here, this is actually a dashboard that I've created around a work group. We'll see in a few moments examples of reports. I will say some of you know Brightmetrics and have used Brightmetrics. We recently refreshed our UI. If you're in our application, you may have seen some of our notifications about that. If you haven't played around in the new UI yet, we call it Radiance. This is what it looks like. You'll get a nice little demonstration of that today. It's something that's available for everyone. You can jump over and take a look at that and play around with it if you want to. I jumped in though and I created a dashboard in here. I called it my 5 metrics dashboard that gives us a few charts that I think are meaningful to just take a look at today. So I'm going to flip over to this dashboard. What this dashboard shows me is a number of charts. We're going to look at all of these, but I want to start with these 2 line charts that you see written out here. I've got at the top here the abandon rate over 30 days, and I can see, okay, here's my 4 to 8% range highlighted on it in green. I can see how that's shifting over time. And this group, in general, they're kind of dancing within this, but you can see that they're jumping up above this fairly frequently. So their abandon rate's kind of on the rise lately. It's been moving upwards, and especially on, I think, Fridays, they're seeing a lot of indications where their abandon rate's a fair amount higher. Right below that, I can see the average queue time. This is breaking out the average queue time for this particular group. Here's what I'm going to do, though. I'm going to click on the magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner of the abandon rate chart. This is going to drill into a new perspective in Brightmetrics and pull up the same chart for me along the top, but I'm going to collapse that away and get down into this reporting perspective that populates down below. What this shows me is a report that I can break out and dynamically change on the fly. So right now I've got a report here that's built out showing me party name and exit reason and count of all calls. I want to change this chart a little bit. What I want to do is remove a couple of the filters that I put on here. And then I want to layer into this. I'm going to pull off the party name here. I'm actually going to drag on the hour of day. I want to see how their call volume is shifting by hour of day. So this is showing me kind of where their abandoned calls were grouping. I've got from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. in their call center. I can see that they have the most abandoned calls just kind of looking through this during their 10 o'clock hour. But again, what I want to look at here is the abandon rate percentage first. I want to see kind of how that's shifting. And then I want to get into that queue time, which in contact center, which this is a contact center group, the measurement that I actually want to pull on here is called weight average. So that's going to build me a report. You can see my report's updating. Let me kind of dissect for you what this report is that I built out. If we look over on the right-hand side, I can see that over the last 30 days, this group is at 3,813 calls. Of those calls, they have an average abandon rate of 6.53%. And I can see that their average queue time, wait time, is 55 seconds. Now, this particular group on average is doing well. They're in the right abandon rate zone. That's partially because they use Brightmetrics. That's a shameless plug there, but they work a lot to optimize these things. But I can see how it's shifting throughout the day, and I can see that during certain hours of the day, they get above that 8% line. They never get too far above it, but I can see it a little bit. But this will still help illustrate the metrics we want to look at. I can see that 55-second average wait time. That means that if we picked up our phones right now and dialed into this call center, we'd have a reasonable expectation that we're going to wait almost a minute to get connected to someone. But then over here, take a look on the left. I've got on the left the abandoned callers. There's been 249 of those. Their average wait time is 41 seconds. Those two numbers are going to tell you everything you need to know about your callers. And here's why. Your overall queue time, the overall time for all of your callers, that 3,000 some odd callers, that tells you how long you're asking your callers to wait. The abandoned callers are the ones that typically hung on to their threshold of willingness. That number is going to be an indication of how long your customers are willing to wait. When there's an imbalance in how long you're asking customers to wait and how long they're willing to wait, you are going to see your abandon rate start to move in one direction or another. Let me walk you through this. If you're asking your customers to wait over here 1 minute and 30 seconds, and your callers are only willing to wait 45 seconds, you're going to see your abandon rates moving pretty high. It's probably going to get up into that 15 to 20% range. Conversely, if your callers are willing to wait 4 minutes and you're picking up your phone on average in 30 seconds, then you're going to see the inverse. You're going to see that you have a relatively low abandon rate. So this is where you want to look next. You want to come in here. And sometimes I find customers where their averages are really, really good numbers, but certain hours of the day are wildly deviating from that average. So you might see a 6.53% on average, but then look at an hour like lunchtime, noon, and find that, oh, the abandon rate for that hour of the day is actually at 25%. And then you'll see impacts of that. Notice that the hours of the day where the abandon rate rises here, these are also the same hours of the day where the wait time rises. And so that's the thing you want to kind of pay attention to. once you get into that good range, if you optimize this, you're going to find that your abandon wait average time is typically very, very close to your overall wait average time. So you're going to have those two numbers in sync. When they get out of whack, that's where you start to have problems. Now, the question is, what do you do? Okay, so our customers aren't willing to wait as long as we want them to wait. What do you do there? Well, one of the options, and probably the one that a lot of you are thinking of already, is increased staffing. You might need more people. And if you have a really, really, really bad abandon rate, 30%, something like that, then that's probably the step that you're looking at taking next. But if your abandon rate's just slightly off, let's say that, you're at 10 or 12%, that's really close to the range, and adding in a whole nother head count, depending on the overall size of your call center, adding a whole nother head count might be overkill. It might be a little bit too much. Maybe you're not at the point where you can justify that yet. And so in those situations and circumstances, I really like to play around with the messaging. Think through what plays to someone while they're waiting in your call queue. There's a lot of different options for that. You can have just static, nothing noise. You can have ringtone. You can have music on hold. I've seen people do things like advertisements, or even have like fun little trivia loops playing in their call centers. Those are all options that you can implement. What you want to evaluate with that is, well, what's going to have the most meaningful impact? What might have an impact and make my customers more willing to wait for me? And you'd be surprised how much of an impact that music on hold can have there. And when I say that, maybe you're already using music on hold. How did you decide what music to play? And have you ever tried different music? Because sometimes those can have surprising effects. I talked to a customer, a couple years now, that started to play around week over week and A/B test different kinds of music. And they said, it was really interesting. The music that we found that our customers waited the longest for was not the music that we would have chosen, because we thought it was kind of annoying. It was, he described it to me as basically elevator music. He said, but for whatever reason, it had an effect on our callers and made them willing to wait a little bit longer. I had another customer tell me a story. They were the one where I got the idea of the trivia loop, where they had just this kind of fun little trivia game running in their call center wait time, where just ask a question. And one of their agents, just one time, and they were a pretty big call center, but just one time, one of their agents got connected to someone who was so engrossed in the question being asked of them in the trivia loop that they said, wait, put me back on hold, or tell me the answer to the question that just got asked to me. They really, really wanted to know what the answer was to the trivia question in front of them. Now, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not promising that if you do something like that, your customers will be excited to wait on hold. That's never going to happen. But you'd be surprised what little changes like that, what effects they can have, and just, hey, our customers are willing to wait 15 or 20 seconds longer because we changed our music. So if you're dealing with an abandon rate that's slightly not optimal, it's 10, 12, 15%. If you want to make a little bit of a meaningful impact towards that 8%, play around with what's playing to those customers while they're waiting. And again, this is something where be smart with this. Play around with that on a week-to-week basis. Make a change, measure the results. If you're using Brightmetrics, it's really easy to do day-over-day comparisons or look at this week versus last week. If what you change is negative, rip it out immediately. Go back. It's easy to make those config changes. If it's positive, then maybe the next week continue in that vein and try something new and keep testing that. But be dynamic and be smart with that, and make sure that you find the right mix for your customers. The last thing that I'll mention for those of you on call center, if you have high abandon rates, callback requests can make a huge impact here as well. Offering someone the ability to request a callback is a great way to solve some of these problems as well. Let me go back to my slide deck here. I'll reiterate and open it up again. This is by far one of the most involved metrics that we get into, but if there are questions, feel free to type those in. I'll keep moving on to our next metric, but we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit here. We've been talking about abandon rates. We've been talking about queue times. If you kind of think about everything I've been talking about, what I've been talking about is the lead up to a call. So someone dials in, they wait in your call queue, in your ECC group, in your work group, in your hunt group for a little while, and then they get connected to an agent. Those are really the two main components of a call center interaction. Call comes in, waits for a little while, gets connected to an agent, or if something else happens. We've been talking so far about that beginning part, the waiting period of time. I want to shift gears now and start to talk about the other side, because honestly, the other side is equally as important. Yes, the amount of time that someone waits and the experience that they have while they wait is going to impact their opinion of your organization. But once they get connected to someone, that also is going to have a big impact. So where I want to go here is to take a look at some metrics about agent performance. And there's two of these measurements that we're going to counterbalance against one another to create one total metric. Those measurements are average handle time and percentage of calls transferred. Let's start with definitions. Average handle time is, for an agent, the average total engagement time with a customer. That's going to be a combination of their talk time with the customer, any time that they put the customer on hold, and any wrap time. That's the after call work that they had with that call. Now, some of you might say, well, I know handle time, but isn't that called something different in my system? And yeah, you're absolutely right. Let me do the same thing. I'll break out the 3 different routing systems you might be using. If you're using hunt groups, there's no such component as wrap time. Wrap time is that kind of period of time after the call for the agent to update their notes. That's not a function in hunt groups. What you want to look at is typically talk time, maybe talk plus hold. Those are both things that are possible in Brightmetrics. If you're running in work groups, this actually is called handle time. That's what the measurement's called. And if you're in contact center, it's the same thing, talk, hold, and wrap together, but it's called treatment time. So again, place where you've got some different measurements here, but you want to look at all 3 of those together. The second measurement you want to pay attention to is the percentage of calls transferred. So when an agent takes a call, ideally that call is going to be resolved in its first touch. So first call resolution is a really common call center term. What you want is an agent to take a call, be equipped themselves to address the call, to handle it, and to solve whatever the caller is asking about. Percentage of calls transferred measures, well, how many of the calls was the agent not able to do that? How many of them did they have to transfer somewhere else? And that's what this measurement's going to show you. I'm going to pull up Brightmetrics again and just show you a simple graph where I've broken this information out. So I've got here this calls by agent. That's giving me the call volume that each agent has had. If I drill through this particular chart, again, it'll open up a new tab for me and give me that reporting table here. What I'm going to do in the reporting table is layer on these 2 measurements, just like we're talking about. I'm going to come to my values here. I'm going to grab the percentage of calls agent transferred, and from time, I'm going to pull up the time dash treatment average. So those are our 2 measurements. Here's how you want to use these. There's going to be an average at the bottom here, 20.94%. The average is not typically what you want to measure. You might have some opinions about, hey, what should my average transfer rate be, or what's my treatment average time? But really what I want you to concern yourself with is more of an agent by agent comparison. If we look at this list of agents, someone like C Tardif, ignore the call count for a moment. We'll use this agent as an example, even though the call count's low. C Tardif has an 11% transfer rate versus A Andrikin, who has a 25% transfer rate. That's a wild shift there between those 2 people. And we want to figure out why are those so different. I'll give you some tools to help with that in just a moment. Same thing with treatment average time. You want to look at, hey, what is my team doing right now, and how are they deviating from that? So we've got an average here of 6 minutes and 37 seconds, but one agent's, 3 minutes higher than that, and another agent is a couple minutes lower than that. Those are some wild shifts, some almost 5-minute deviation between those 2 agents. That's what you're looking for in this, is you're not necessarily looking for, I want my group average to be this, but I want a uniform level of support coming from my agents. Here's why. If we flip over to this matrix that I built out, every good presentation will have at some point a matrix in it, is what someone told me, and so I had to build one for you as well. So this matrix, what it's drawing out for me is those 2 measurements, the average handle time here on the left and up above the percentage of calls transferred. And it's mapping them onto this grid based on, if you take each one of your agents and plot them across this, it's going to tell you a little bit about their performance. So when I say low or high percentage of calls transferred, what I mean by that is not low or high relative to an arbitrary number. I mean low or high relative to your group. So if we go back here just to illustrate this for you, when I see that transfer rate, if I say, okay, our average is 20.94%, that means that someone like P. Stapleton is low. Someone like A. Andrikin is high. Even if your ideal number is like a 5% transfer rate, that doesn't mean all your agents are high. I want you to do this as a peer group comparison. Who is low relative to the rest of their peers. And that's the one other thing I should mention in this. If you have a call center that is somewhat split, maybe you have tier 1 and tier 2 agents, don't compare them all together. The tier 2 agents are naturally going to transfer less calls than the tier 1 agents. You want to look at them as separate groups. Group all your tier 1s, see how they exhibit against one another. Look at your tier 2s, see how they exhibit against one another. Let me walk you through this entire matrix so you kind of understand what each one of these sections is. I'm going to start over here in the blue section. If you find that one of your agents has a high transfer rate and a high average handle time, my number one guess when I see that is that that agent is new to your organization. Here's why. They're spending a lot of time on the phone. Their average handle time is long. That means they're trying really hard. Someone who doesn't want to do their job doesn't spend a lot of time on it. So they're trying really hard, but ultimately they are having to escalate a fair amount. So you're seeing a high transfer rate. If that person is indeed new, make sure you're training them and giving them what they need to be successful. Ultimately, that should normalize over time. If they're getting the proper training, you're going to see them start to get a grasp on it, and they'll move into one of these other categories. If that person's a little bit more established, then you want to ask yourself some questions. How long has that person been there? Is it maybe a bad fit? Did we maybe bring them on during a busy season and not train them appropriately? That's typically a little bit more of a warning flag if you find that someone is well established and exhibiting in that quadrant. If we move down from there, the coaching opportunity, I will say if you take only one thing away from this slide, or honestly only one thing away from this entire presentation today, I would take this one away. I think this is one of the most valuable things that you can pull out of all of these metrics. If you find an agent that has a low handle time and a high percentage of calls transferred, that is very, very concerning to me. What that says is this person is not spending a lot of time on the phone and they're escalating calls. That typically means one of two things. Either they are severely under-equipped in their job and they're starting to get frustrated and give up. So they've got a lot of calls coming in, they don't know how to handle them, they're not sure what to do, and they're just immediately passing them off. They're not trying very hard to solve them. That's a problem. Everyone's been the caller that dials into a call center that gets bounced around and around in the call center and never gets connected to the person that they actually need to talk to. So you want to deal with that quickly. The other problem that pops up here is laziness. Someone's getting calls and they're saying, I don't want to deal with this today, and they're passing it off to someone else. They're making their problem someone else's work. That's also a problem. That's a problem internally. That's going to create morale issues, but it's a problem externally. Again, nobody wants to dial in and get bounced around. They want to get their call to resolution on the first touch. And so that's going to be an indication you're starting to have some of that bouncing. That is one of the most common frustrations that people will say about their call center interaction. So if you can find where that's happening and deal with it, that's what you want to do here. Now, again, this is not about stamping out every single possible escalation ever. There are going to be times when calls need to be transferred for good reason. Again, you're looking for the times that it's happening where it wasn't a good reason. And this is what this quadrant is going to bring out for you. Typically, you'll have a lot of transfers here that there's something wrong there. Now, again, this is a coaching opportunity. I wouldn't necessarily take this data and go immediately fire someone, but start to watch them, start to work alongside them, start to maybe hop on some calls with them, see if you can train them into one of the quadrants that we want them in, specifically that good one on the left. Jumping over to the left-hand side now, I'm going to start with the bottom quadrant, the one that's labeled dig deeper. This is one that's really tricky. If you have an agent that has a low handle time and a low percentage of calls transferred, a lot of times the reaction to that is awesome. That's exactly what I want. And it looks really good on paper. That person doesn't have to escalate calls, so they're probably dealing with them and getting calls to resolution, and they don't have to spend a lot of time on it. So on paper, you're like, great, they can take more calls during the day and they get everything solved. I would just double check a couple things on that one, because sometimes that low handle time can be frustrating to callers where they just feel like, hey, I'm not getting to resolution, I'm not getting what I need. And the agent might think that the customer got what they needed, but the customer actually didn't. So look at things like customer SAT scores if you have them. If you're a sales group, look at sales numbers. If you find that, yeah, all of those things are good and my agent is still in this quadrant, what I would say is pay that person more. They are kind of the dream call center agent. They're very, very efficient. They're very strong at getting callers to resolution and getting them what they need, and they can do it in a short amount of time. that's the dream. That's what you want to see happening. That's typically pretty rare. You're going to find maybe one or two of those over the course of, you know, an entire call center's life and journey. Most good agents are going to present actually above that. And that's where we get to our last category here. If you have an agent that has a high handle average time and a low percentage of calls transferred, this is typically where you're looking to move your agents toward. Now, when I say a high average handle time, I don't mean really high. I don't mean way up there. What I mean by that is, you know, they are on the average or slightly above the average for your group. So if your average is a handle time of, you know, 10 minutes, then, you know, they're at 10 to 12 minutes, something like that. You know, they're not, you know, we don't want them wasting too much time. We don't want them 2Xing or 3Xing the amount of time that a call takes, but we want them, you know, going the extra mile, making sure the caller's taken care of, getting it to resolution and not having to escalate it. That's really a good number, what we're looking for there. So again, let me show you this in the real world. Let me pop back here to our list of agents. I'm going to sort by the percentage of calls transferred. When I look at someone like Andrekin has a high transfer rate, about 4% higher, and it's kind of right on the line around treatment average, maybe just a little bit low. You know, that's one that it's drifting into that kind of coaching opportunity area. It's not necessarily right there. That handle time's not quite low enough for me to worry in, and the deviations aren't quite strong enough. But that's one where I'd kind of start to pay attention. Hey, what's going on with this person? Why are we seeing so many calls escalating? Maybe we need to figure out what's going on there. Someone like S. Elliott's definitely a concern here. S. Elliott's showing a high transfer rate and a very, very low treatment average time. That's definitely someone in that coaching opportunity. If we look down at some of the people that are a little bit lower, J. Toasty and C. Orr, I can see that both of them have slightly higher than average treatment times. That's where I'd look and say, hey, those are probably some of the really good top performers in this particular group. And then on the flip side, if we get down to someone like, you know, P. Stapleton, or there's not a lot of call volume beyond that, but P. Stapleton has, you know, a low and low. That's one of those dig it deepers, you know, where both those numbers are a little bit lower than the averages. A little bit of question there about what's going on, why is that happening? All right, that was our third metric, all about agent performance. We have two more to go. The next two are actually significantly quicker. This next one's an interesting one. It gets a little bit deeper into, I shouldn't say deeper, it's another metric that gets a little bit more into agent performance, but in a different way. The last one's about agent performance when they're on the phone. This one's more about agent performance in terms of how are they using your system. There's two measurements here that we want to look at and balance against one another. The agent available percentage, that's the amount of time that an agent is available to take calls. So that's also called idle time, is another kind of common industry term for it. Basically what it looks at is when an agent's during their, you know, let's say 8-hour shift, what percentage of that time were they available to take calls? Meaning they weren't on a call and they weren't, you know, in some kind of a break status or logged out or anything like that. So kind of what's their total percentage available time? And then second to that, the percentage of calls answered. When an agent's phone rings, do they pick it up or not? These are really interesting measurements, where in the last one, when we looked at this measurement, I said, you don't care about the averages. You don't really care about, you know, I don't want you to set a specific benchmark of I want my transfer rate at 15%. You want to really kind of look at what are your agents exhibiting and compare them against that. This one's a little bit different. This is a chart that I created here. In this particular one, it actually is an area where you want to define some very strong benchmarks for this one. So let's talk about transfer rate first. If an agent's phone is ringing, they should be picking it up. Unless if the only time when that's not true is if you're running hunt groups and you're doing a ring simultaneous ring. And really hunt groups in general, there's no concept of an agent being unavailable, the user being unavailable. So in hunt groups in general, but if you're doing hunt groups or you're using work groups that ring simultaneously, when you're doing ring simultaneous, that's going to present the call to everyone. Let's say you have 6 people in your work group and you ring simultaneously to all of them. It's presenting to everyone. Only one person can actually answer it. And that one person's going to answer that call. and the rest of the people are going to miss out on that. So what that means is if you had just one call in today, one person would get 100% answer rate and everyone else would get 0%. Average that out across an actual call volume, you wind up just seeing everyone with a very, very low percentage. So it's hard to set a benchmark in those environments. Anywhere else, if you're doing distributed calling, ring longest idle is my personal favorite, but even if you're doing top down or round robin, that is something where you can say, hey, if your phone's ringing, you should be picking it up. And if you're not picking it up, why weren't you unavailable? Why didn't you log out or use release or something like that? Typically 95% or higher is what you want out of that measurement. On the idle percentage time, this is one where you want your team to have enough breathing room through the day that they're not burning out. So you want them to have, 20 to 30% of their day where they can just kind of play catch up and they're not just on the phone slaving away all day long. But you also don't want them just readily available all day, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for stuff to come in. So you don't want to see them with a 60 or 70% idle rate. It depends a little bit on, what are the other responsibilities that these people have when they're not on the phone? Are they responding to emails? Are they working on special projects? In that case, you can have a little bit of a higher idle time. If their job is they're a call center agent and that's what they do, you want to see that number a little bit more down towards the 20% range. So for those benchmarks, again, to just kind of be clear with that, you want your agent available percentage or idle percentage, you want that number somewhere in the 20 to 40% range, where 20 to 40% of their day they're not on the phone and the rest of the time they are on the phone. The percentage of calls answered, 95% or higher. Here's what this will indicate to you. I've got another matrix here. This one's pretty quick. This will indicate to you if you have some opportunities to, kind of train your team. If your team has a high answer rate, they're picking up their phone and they're highly available, that means you're probably overstaffed. You have a team that's able to handle everything that comes to them and they're just kind of readily available. That's going to indicate overstaffing. The one that I think is interesting on here is the cases where you have a low percentage of calls answered but a high available time. That's going to indicate that your team's not using the system appropriately. Common example of this is, let's say that it's lunchtime and an agent steps away and they don't use log out in their work groups or release in their ECC group. They're going to keep receiving calls throughout that entire period of time, but they're not actually available. So they're going to miss all those calls. They're going to have a 0% answer rate for that hour. In that case, you just need to coach them. Hey, you used the system wrong. You weren't actually available, but it said you were and it kept presenting calls to you. You don't want that happening to your callers either. That's an extra 24 seconds every single time a caller has to wait ringing through that person. What you want to see is, again, 95% or higher on the answer rate and 20 to 40% on the available time. That's going to be your good quadrant. It's somewhat impossible to have a low percentage of calls answered and a low available time. If you're not available, you're not being presented calls. So that would only happen on like a holiday. So that's why I've graded this one out here. If you're seeing that happen, it usually means the call volume you're looking at is really, really low. All right, the last measurement that I have today, and then we'll open it wide for questions if there are any, wrap codes. So I always like to, for those of you that are using contact center, every measurement that we've looked at so far is something that can be run for hunt groups or work groups or ECC groups. And I like to offer up those metrics because there are a lot of metrics that are uniform across them. But for those of you that have contact center, you've made an investment in an advanced call center application. And with that comes some additional features. I've alluded to a couple of those. Release times, a really, really valuable feature. The other one that's really valuable that you get out of this, and by far, this is not an exhaustive list of all the values of it, but from a data standpoint, one of the other ones I really like is wrap codes. So I wanted to end on this metric for those of you that are in call center. Wrap codes, for those that don't know, wrap codes give an agent the ability at the end of their call to tag that call with a particular listing. And typically those listings are like frequent customer interactions. What was this call about? I think this is one of the most valuable call center functionalities that you can use when you start to mine the data around it. And there's two ways that I like to have customers look at this data. I like you to look at the count of wrap codes by interaction. I want you to look at the average handle time. Let me just show you this. It's easier to see than it is to talk through. I've got at the bottom here 2 charts that I've drafted up around wrap codes in this call center environment. On the left-hand side is the count by wrap code. A little bit of background on this. This particular organization, this is a municipality, a city based in California in the States where I live. I have a good relationship with them. They've been kind enough to let me use their data for this. This particular group that we're looking at is a utility billing department. So they're handling all the billing for water and power for the city. And so you can see from their wrap codes kind of what some of these things mean: account info, leaks, turn off my service, those sorts of things. So they're flagging what are people calling about. When I look at this count, I can see what are the most common interactions here. Account info is by far and large the most common call type that they get. When I see that, I think to myself, it's 2019. I can go online for pretty much every service that I subscribe to and get my account info from the website. Why are people calling in here? Maybe they don't know that that's possible. Maybe if we set up an IVR with a message at the front end that said, hey, did you know, you're welcome to wait, but did you know that if you go to xyz.com, you can download this information yourself? And you might decrease the call volume. If this team was struggling with, we have a 15% abandonment rate, one of the ways they could fix their problems is decreasing their call volume. If they could do that around account info very easily with that kind of a message, then they've done themselves a service and don't need to hire another person. So that's where the count comes in, is where are you potentially taking calls that you don't need to? How could you push those off to other avenues? Then you have the treatment time by wrap code. So this is a little different. This is for each wrap code. How long on average do those calls take your agents to resolve? In this case, I've got this one called CAP that's at 12 minutes and 33 seconds, and then leak usage and then turn off. Now you want to use these two in tandem because CAP doesn't even rank as one of their top 10 wrap codes over here. So it's not happening very often. So that's one where I wouldn't worry about it being long. It doesn't come up a lot. But leak usage is second on both of these. Leak usage is the second most common kind of call that these agents have, and it's also the second highest in terms of time that it takes. That's a great opportunity to go pull your team and figure out, hey, why does this particular kind of call take so much longer than another kind? And what you'll find a myriad of information. Just ask your team. Sometimes they'll tell you, oh yeah, we're not entirely sure how to deal with that one. Maybe you can train them. Other times they'll tell you, oh yeah, every time the caller dials in, we need to get a piece of information from them. I'll use my cell phone provider as an example. I've had a cell phone for, gosh, how many years now? iPhones changed the world. But, every so often, and it's actually changed a little more recently, my example is going away, but a little while ago, I remember I would have to call into my cell phone provider to get some account information. The first question they'd ask me is, what's your account number? And I'd read off my phone number to them. And they'd say, no, what's your account number? And I'd say, oh, I have no idea. And I'd have to go dig up a paper bill back then, or maybe log into a website and find that on my most recent bill, read off my account number, and then they could help me. That might take me 2 or 3 minutes to figure out, and that agent's just along for the ride. So if that's something that, hey, this particular agent, every time this kind of call comes up, they have to collect a piece of information, and the caller doesn't have that readily available. Well, could we use an IVR? Could we collect that information in the call center ahead of time and pop it up to the agent? That's where you get into some automation and training opportunity. So, with these things that are taking longer, go and pull your agents, figure out, see if they have an answer for why. If you can make them more efficient on those particular call types, again, that's going to enable you to do more with less people, especially if you're approaching that point where you're like, it's almost time to hire a new person. I don't have the budget yet. I need to wait until 2020. That's a great time to start to dig into these things. Maybe you can just kind of stave off some of those customer satisfaction hits that'll happen when you get into that position by making your team more efficient in the interactions they have. All right, back to our slide deck for a quick wrap up, and then we'll just open it for questions. So 5 metrics I've walked you through today. Brief recap on them: abandon rate, target between 4 to 8%. If you're under 4%, you're probably overstaffed. If you're over 8%, it probably is hurting your customer satisfaction in some way. If you don't wind up in that perfect range of 4 to 8%, look to metric 2. What are your wait times, your queue times? Your overall queue time tells you how long you're asking your customers to wait. Your abandoned queue time is going to tell you how long your customers are actually willing to wait. Those two things, when in balance, are what's going to drive your abandon rate up or down. Third, agent performance. Look at your agent's handle time and percentage of calls transferred. Again, the number one thing to look for today, if possible, out of that is what agents have a low handle time and a high percentage of calls transferred. They're not spending a lot of time on the phone, and they're escalating a lot of calls. Number 4, agent percent available and percentage of calls answered. Your team should be picking up the phone. If they're not, is it because they're not using the system appropriately? You look for a 95% rate or higher there. And lastly, available percentage, you want that somewhere in the 20 to 40% range. And then number 5, we just went through wrap codes, look at the counts, look at the average handle times, find areas for automation and training to make your team more efficient. With that, we've come to the end. Are there any questions that I can answer at this point? I'll leave it open for a couple minutes here, and then I'll pass it back over to Steve and Dylan to close us out today. So I've got a question here. It says how. I'm sorry, I'm reading it as I'm trying to say it to everyone. Okay, so in essence, the question is, it's asking, how do I set a benchmark for my average wait time or average queue time? So that's where we go back to metric 2 here. What should be the target time there? That's a really, really interesting question, one that I get asked frequently. And what I'll say is, probably my least favorite answer to give, but I'll justify the position in a moment. This is something that really depends. It's really, really hard to say to you, you should answer calls in 30 seconds or less, or you should answer calls in 60 seconds or less. Here's why. Let me use myself as an example. We're a technology software company. We're based in California. We're about 45 minutes north of Silicon Valley. And so in Silicon Valley, you'll come across all these things where, people are trying to emulate other companies that they respect in the marketplace. And so, a common thing that we might do is say, okay, we're going to answer our calls in 30 seconds or less because Google does that. And if Google does it, we should do it too. Well, a couple things about that. Google does that probably because they pay a lot of attention to data like this, and they found that their customers aren't willing to wait longer than 30 seconds. They also have the infrastructure to support that. They're a huge company. That might not be realistic for you. It might also not be necessary for you. And here's why. I run into this all the time. Well, we're a customer, we're in healthcare, and we just set based on some benchmark that we saw another healthcare provider doing. That's not what you want to do. What you want to look at is the measurements that we've been playing with today and see, for those abandoned callers, how long are your callers willing to wait? If you succeed, use the Google example. If you're a technology company, you succeed in answering calls in 30 seconds or less, but your customers are willing to wait 5 minutes, you're going to wind up with a 1% abandon rate in that case because your callers aren't asking you for that. They're willing to wait for a really long time. So again, it's something where there isn't a clear kind of cut benchmark. I have seen customers that have an average wait time of 6 or 8 minutes with a very, very healthy abandon rate because that's just the agreement that they have, the unwritten, unspoken agreement that they have with their customers, and their customers are fine with it. On the inverse, I've seen people that have 15 or 20% abandon rates with average queue times of 45 seconds. That's not a very long time, but their customers are looking for something faster. So this is something where you really want to play with the data. I know that's kind of a non-answer. So, the other thing I'll say in this is we offer free trials of our software. We offer free trials of our software. The Blackstar team's always happy to jump on and work with you. We'd be happy to jump on and talk to you. So if you're not sure what the right number is for you, that's something where we can come alongside and help. It's a very hard thing to kind of answer in aggregate like that. Another question I had was, do you have a template for the percent available and percent answered chart you showed? I think you're talking about this one. No, I don't have a template for that one. Let me double check. I don't think that's on our ECC template. No, it's not. So, John, here's what I'll do. Let me, I'm sorry, I misread the name. John T. Here's what I'll do. Let me pop back over to this, and I'm going to pull up that chart that I had up there. I'll open the configuration of it so you can see it, and then I'll also snap a picture of this, and I'll send you an email and follow up so that you've got the actual configuration of the chart. But here's the chart built out here. It's built on agent data. It's just a bar chart. I'm going to snap a picture of this with the values that I've added in here so that you've got just kind of a quick reference to work backwards from and build that out. The only thing you want to apply is a filter for your agent group in that case. again, I'll send you a copy of that, but I also want to just pull it up on the screen here so that you can snap it now or build it out now if you want to as well. Great question. Any other questions I can answer? I know we're coming up quick on time, so, but great questions so far. All right, I don't see anything else coming in. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna pop back over to my deck. I'm gonna pull up Steve's contact info again so that you have people to reach out to if you have any questions. Steve, I'll pass it back over to you and let you take us out today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. And thank you for everybody that's obviously stayed on the call for its duration. It's amazing the valuable insights that are available when using Brightmetrics in conjunction with the SureTell system, or My Voice Connect as it's now called. It always does amaze me that SureTell, Mitel themselves don't seem to be able to produce a level of data that's available through Brightmetrics. So I know we've got a lot of customers that use it and understand the benefit of access to that level of data. But for those customers that don't, and Peter, thanks for mentioning it, we can arrange a trial, put Brightmetrics onto the system, leave it on there for a couple of weeks, and then undertake a webinar where we're actually looking at the customer's data. So not generic data, but actually data that pertains to the way that their system is set up and running. And we find typically customers that gain that level of insight into the system more often than not choose to retain and keep the Brightmetrics subscription going. So that's a testament to how good it is. Also, you mentioned your abandoned rate, especially while queuing. It's worth noting that Blackstar, in conjunction with one of our partners, can provide bespoke music and marketing on hold solutions, including PRS license paid and license free music. So if you are looking to improve your abandoned rate and queue, and you think that dropping in some marketing or information about the business or anything else that might be happening within the business, then we can help with the creation of those recordings and dropping them into the call queues at the relevant time. So other than that, thanks again. Obviously, what you have done for anybody that's using Brightmetrics is you've run through all of the demo using the new Radiance UI, which is great to see. Nice, fresh look and feel to Brightmetrics. And I think that's probably it from our side for today, Peter, other than thanking you again and thanking everybody that's taken the time out of their busy days to attend our webinar this afternoon.
I'll just echo that as well. Thank you so much, everyone. I never take it lightly that people are willing to come listen to me talk for an hour, so I hope this was useful. If there's anything we can do, follow up with us. As Steve mentioned at the beginning, we've recorded this. Give us a day or so. We'll get that uploaded and out to you so that you can reference back to this if needed. In the meantime, let us know if there's any questions that we can answer. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.